for many years, but also a new working relationship with us in those schools, taking on more responsibility to really work with the principal and her team at a local level to continue to support her and enable that, she's able to continue to succeed for her faculty, for the parents and the communities that they're serving. And so while it was only a short time ago, it took an awful long time to negotiate that 10-year legal agreement that we entered into with the Archdiocese. And John Moran, who you'll hear from more, was really instrumental in that. And we'll talk more about it, but kind of a vision for how that structure would work. And, the 30 schools, people often ask, why were they chosen? And there wasn't a notion that those schools weren't doing a good job. It wasn't a notion that those 30 schools were, particularly challenged. In fact, many of them are operating fantastically. They are delivering great outcomes for their students. They are strong, well-known community-based organizations that are loved and appreciated, but that for them to have a trajectory, because these 30 schools really truly are in the most underserved and sort of the most financially poor, not communities that lack in talent, in optimism and hope, but that financially the opportunities that need to be spread more equally. And so these schools play a pivotal role. And so that's why these schools were selected. We want to make sure they remained open, that they didn't go anywhere, that they continue to serve. And that's how this whole agreement kind of works. And we'll talk more about it, but this 10-year agreement really gives these school principals, these teachers, these parents and guardians hope that their school isn't, threatened the next year, the year after, that on a 10-year trajectory, it's going to be there. And that changes all of our thinking, how we invest in those schools, how we plan for the future. Stability matters, right? Removing a little bit of that fear, a little bit of that concern really matters. And we use a consultative approach. This isn't some of the news articles go and say it's a takeover. It's it sounds like an LBO buyout and a private equity deal. Not that those are bad, and we have plenty of people that work in the space and advise us, but this is really building on a long-term relationship we've had with these principals, these teachers, these parents, these communities. And it's really in partnership with them that we work. And we're really building on their mission-focused programs at the local level. And so this is a huge opportunity for our organization to really pivot and grow, evolve to the changing needs of our mission. And that's incredibly important, never easy, but I think that this is also going to be unbelievably rewarding as we look back in 10 years and say, gee, this was the right thing to do, and we really are on the right path. And many of you are obviously familiar with this and maybe heard a little more or less. And so hearing from the two folks we have this day, Rebecca Lindsay-Ryan and John Moran, will really help bring this to life. And I got to say, one of the things we've been most lucky with at Big Shows Fund is the stability of our team. We have really had a nucleus that have been together for a long time, while adding on people that really share our values, our vision, our hope for this mission. But in particular, John, Rebecca, and I have worked together almost for 15 years together. And that's a long time. And so in addition to people I really see as my partners in this mission, and that I get a chance to walk alongside of every day, they're tremendously good friends. They're mentors, they're teachers for me, and supporters. And really, I'm inspired by what they do. And when I said earlier, I sweat about all that's happening, I stop sweating when I think about the people we have in our team. Rebecca Lindsay-Ryan is our Senior Director of Academic Programs and External Affairs, a very official title. But really, Rebecca has been a jack of all trades at Big Shows when she started. She's done fundraising, she's done events, she's done helping with finances, scholarships, mentoring. She's helped all of us. I met Rebecca Lindsay-Ryan way back when she was just graduating from DePaul. She's a double demon, actually, but at the time she was just graduating. And I was at Cristo Rey, had just started there and was building a team. And through a friendship, I met the president of DePaul at the time, Father Minogue. And he said, we're looking for someone mission-driven, really smart, and that wants to be part of something that's growing. He said, the smartest, most mission-driven person I know is Rebecca Lindsay-Ryan. And he was right. She certainly is. And I've been blessed to work with her for many, many years, and have a friendship with her for those years. She has been in the classroom as a teacher. She's developed a lot of our academic programs, really built our academic programs from scratch. She's leading our Northwest Indiana initiative with our team down there. She helped put that whole thing together. I was happy to be in the room sitting with her when she was talking to Beth and Bruce White, who sponsored it, but it was Rebecca. She really carried that and has done tremendous work. She's recognized as the Chicago Council on Global Affairs Emerging Leaders. She's a part of the National KIP Leadership Fellow Program. She's got a lot of credits to go along with her, but she is a wonderful person. And for those of you that know her, you know this, and those who don't, you'll get to know her. She and Biz, her wife, are raising 3 wonderful children. I'm sure they're right behind that door. How they manage all this, I don't know, but they do it easily. John Moran is our Senior Director of the Patrons Program. And the Patrons Program is unbelievably well known, and John really built it into what it is today. It's tremendously impactful, but that doesn't fully capture all that John does. Everything from he's our IT, really. He manages our entire system, keeps us all running. He's helpful in thinking about our future financial position and planning. He is out in some of the schools every single week and has become part of their team, literally part of their team. John is an alum of Notre Dame, and he's also, he's a CPA actually from there, and also got his MBA from Northwestern while working full-time and married with children. You can imagine. You get a sense for John's ability to carry enormous amounts of work. He's one of the smartest, fastest, quickest learns you'll ever meet. But more than anything, John is one of the most mission-driven. He's got a huge heart for this. I had the great fortune, as I started Big Shoulders Fund, to get a 2.5-page letter from John Moran talking about the impact of Catholic education in his own life, his children's lives, and why he wanted to make sure that was an opportunity for every child. And I, couldn't dial the phone fast enough and say, please come to Big Shoulders. And since he's come, he has incubated, invented, created some of the programs that really define who we are today. And John is a great friend and also a mentor and a real supporter. And I'm lucky to walk alongside of him in this mission. He and his wife, Laura, I was going to say are raising, but they've in some ways mostly raised. They've got 4 adult children, Molly, who is now in the world of working after going to U of C, and 2 kids at Notre Dame, and 1 on a golf scholarship, Illinois Wesleyan. Again, how he juggles it all, I don't know. But today we're going to hear from them. They are wonderful leaders here at Big Shoulders Fund, and they're going to bring to life this agreement and all the hope that we have. So please help me in welcoming John and Rebecca to the stage. Mini-Me is clapping behind me over here. Rebecca and John, thanks for joining us. I feel like you guys have been on a tour these days talking about Big Shoulders Fund Plus. And that's everything from sitting with our principals and talking about it, and with our board and with our CAC. But let me just step back a moment, and maybe just because I think it's important understanding how we got to the Big Shoulders Fund Plus program, this agreement. Could you tell everybody a little bit about how you came to be at Big Shoulders Fund and why you stayed for so long? What inspires you, in spite of having to work alongside me? What keeps you at Big Shoulders Fund, and why you find it so fulfilling?
Well, you told me I was an indentured servant.
Can we get that? Is that recorded? No.
Is that not
I was
right?
I was wondering, is there an option? Are you allowed to leave? I thought it was like The Godfather.
There is no leaving. This is absolutely, you are here forever. That would actually make me smile much even bigger than now. I'll sing a song if that's the case.
Big Shoulders has been a great opportunity to take, and as Josh said, I spent 20 plus years in Fortune 500 companies, mainly in customer facing and a lot in contract negotiation and contract management roles. And while I thought some of the negotiation stuff was going to be a thing of my past when I joined Big Shoulders, I was pretty convinced at the time, and I'm still convinced that a lot of, and you guys are a great example of this, that some of the things that, I picked up in my for-profit world, not just education, but experiences and things, which would be, similar to a lot of you, I'm sure. This is an avenue to use those in a way that helps children and helps Catholic schools, which I'm passionate about, for their future. So that's been a really good thing.
Just one thing I didn't mention, John actually had a for-profit career. I left that out, and I think PwC, AT&T, and all in very senior level positions, which was a great skill set to bring to our mission. So I should have mentioned that because that plays into some of the further questions and discussion.
He also is a CPA, so I try not to ask him too many accounting questions because I don't know anything about that. My brother's a CPA, so I don't do accounting.
Talk about damning by faint praise. Holy cow.
So I kind of came to Big Shoulders because Josh asked me to, is the short reason. The longer reason is, I come from a family of educators. My parents were both teachers and professors at various times in their career. And I have always just felt incredibly passionate about education as being the primary vehicle for setting a path for your own life. Outside of the lottery that is whoever you're born to in terms of your parents, the one great opportunity that we can provide to all young people is the opportunity of a great education and high expectations for their future. And I felt very strongly that I was provided that pathway, and I wanted to make sure that whatever I did with my work, that it was always geared towards increasing access to that opportunity for more students, regardless of the financial background of their family. So in particular, my parents happened to also be previously in religious life before they ended up married and had 4 kids. So Catholic schools figured into their background and to their life and their trajectory that allowed me to have all the good experiences that I had in terms of my education and my path. So when the opportunity arose to come to Big Shoulders, I jumped at that and am so glad that I get to be a part of this mission to provide that opportunity of education for more students.
So I know, obviously, both of you are obviously very passionate about this mission. But I don't know if you had the same feeling when people talk about the statistics about Big Shoulders Fund, and you think back to 15, 10, whatever it is, 12, 13, 14, 15 years ago when you arrived at Big Shoulders Fund, and how much has changed today. A lot of good things have happened. What are you most hopeful for them? Like, what do you see? What has changed over those years that really puts these schools in a place to be really successful for the next 100 years, the next decade, or whatever it is?
Well, maybe one way to think about it is that, so the Big Shoulders Fund was and still primarily is, rightfully so, a scholarship organization, right? We're here to provide access to kids to get a different kind of educational experience than they otherwise would have. And, in the handful of years before Josh joined, and then particularly, soon thereafter, when I joined and Rebecca, I think there was a great recognition that was always going to be our center. At the same time, it was important to augment that so that the schools are doing a great job for the kids, both to serve the kids as well as to draw other kids to the school. And so, the really good aspect about it is we're 30 plus years into investing in these schools. And at the same time, we're 15, 18 years into investing in addition to, and in a way that's very complementary to the scholarships, investing in making the schools better functioning institutions for the students. And when I think of the pandemic stuff, certainly that's been a challenge. At the same time, though, it's also very clear to me that there are aspects of what schools were able to do that were never going to be possible without, a bunch of elements that we invested in the past 15 years. And while a computer we bought 10 years ago certainly isn't meaningful anymore to the remote learning, a principal that we invested in who was a teacher, 10 or 15 years ago certainly is. Some of the teaching practices certainly are. And so there's a lot that has gone into the schools that we work with, not just the 30 schools, but all the schools, and they all get the chance to build on that. And an asset like a computer has a life cycle, but some of the things that have been done and some of the ways that asset was leveraged still exist today, even if the computer is out of use.
That was a pretty great answer, John. I'm not sure if I could follow that, but I do think that one of the things that particularly provides me a lot of hope is, unfortunately, the story of education in, especially in low-income communities, continues to be really challenged, and it continues to be something that I think we collectively, as a nation and as a city, need to continue to address. Right? If we are going to make sure that people have equal opportunities to be able to contribute to their communities and to contribute to their cities and to contribute to Chicago in general. We need to ensure that we provide those opportunities for young people. And I have to say, the trajectory of Big Shoulders from where it was then to where it is now makes me feel like there is a long-lasting future to this mission, to those results. The results were there before. The schools are great schools. We can do better things, and we have done better things to make them even better schools, and that's a constant growth trajectory. But whether they continue to exist in the communities that they serve is really related to our ability to make them, as effective and efficient as possible in serving their mission. And so I think our evolution through all the supporters that are on this call and the supporters who've been with Big Shoulders since we started has allowed us really to set a new future for the schools that we serve that quite frankly is not true in a lot of other urban areas.
It is. There's a lot of hope in that, and certainly more than anything at the local level, community buy-in and real ownership of these schools, but also the programs that you've both helped to lead with your teams and develop in response to listening to the local community. So just to fast forward and we can talk more about it, but I think, there's a little bit of background. One of the things we want to talk about today is the Big Shoulders Fund Plus agreement we just signed. I'm certain there's a celebration in that and tremendous hope in that. But maybe just to take a minute to, I kind of touched a little bit on how we got there, and there's the mechanics of it, that. And I spent a lot of hours with John where I saw his negotiating skills, where we negotiated for a year and a half to get this thing across. I, again, did a lot of sweating and watching as John guided us through this. But, maybe John, I'd love to hear from both of you on this. John, just to talk through that we didn't just drop Big Shoulders Fund Plus out of the sky. There was a couple of predecessor things, access, coverage schools. Maybe you could give a little background to everybody of how we, again, primarily scholarship, but evolving as an organization, and how those agreements have helped us to get to where we are today.
All the goods and the bads? Maybe just the goods.
I think that, a little bit, certainly there's a lot of really goodness, but I think, some of the challenges, I think, give context to why this is important where we are today.
Yeah, so the whole Covered Schools Big Shoulders Fund Plus effort really starts with how do we make sure that Catholic schools are there and available and thriving for the kids in those communities. And they're not going to be thriving for the kids in the communities. They're not going to provide services and options for the kids in the communities if they're not open. And certainly, it doesn't take a lot of reading to find lots and lots of stories about closed Catholic schools all over the country, including in Chicago. I think it's pretty clear that the pace of Catholic school closures in Chicago has really slowed down in the past 10 to 12 years, I would say, in large part to people on this phone call, and even not just Josh and Rebecca and I, but I know Carolyn Broughton's on the phone. I know Sarah Lancer, Howie was supposed to be on the phone, through their efforts as well. So we annually, and we still happens, we get the phone call from the Archdiocese saying, these schools are going to close. And why does a Catholic school close? A Catholic school closes primarily because enrollment has declined, and it also closes with the ups and downs of the Archdiocese financial situation. And that's not a dig on them. It's a reality, right? That is the reality of what it takes. And we, over time, would write checks to keep Catholic schools from closing. And at some point we said, this is kind of silly. We write a check for this school and then we're right back at it next year. And so we started to try to negotiate some tail to our contributions, where if we were going to write a check for a couple $100,000, we wanted that school to be open for more than 5 minutes. And so that evolved over time. It also became clear to us that, okay, writing checks is interesting, writing checks is, helpful and good. But if we want these schools not to be in the need for money all the time, we're going to have to roll up our sleeves and help them, in ways we've not engaged with before, other than, through the patrons program we had started, and then Rebecca's programs and the academic side have added a lot of value. And so we had a predecessor agreement that had 12 schools in it, that they were protected. We rolled up our sleeves, we wrote a lot of checks. In those schools, some of them have really taken off. Some of them are still struggling, and you said, well, why is it still struggling? Really, the answer to that question is the schools we serve in general, and particularly the schools in this particular program, are in the most difficult areas of the city. We're talking about Austin, we're talking about Englewood, we're talking about Otto and Gresham, we're talking about Little Village, we're talking about areas that it's a challenge to run any enterprise, and particularly one that asks people to pay money to send their kids to the school. And so, over time, we saw some great successes. We also expanded our desire to take more schools out of harm's way. And that's, in some ways, that's how I think about it, is taking schools out of harm's way. And so that really culminated in a couple of years ago with us coming up with the idea of, the heck with dealing with a school or two or three at a time. Why don't we just pick the schools that are at the most risk, both because of where they serve as well as the archdiocesan financial situation, and let's dig into those and let's protect those, and then let's also work very closely with those schools to enhance them. And that's really how the Big Shoulders Plus thing got started.
Josh, you're muted. I don't know if you.
I think someone said to the mute. Someone smart said, "Let's keep Josh quiet. Let Rebecca and John just keep going." But just on that, as John described, kind of the evolution of getting there. There's a mechanics that which he talked about that led us to want to have a longer trajectory to invest in these schools. When you think about that evolution there and programmatically, how that's evolved and how that prevents an opportunity, perhaps, maybe just your thoughts on that.
When we talk about the academic side of the house in terms of the culture and climate of schools, as well as student outcomes over the long term, right? Education is a long-term investment, and Josh kind of got sick of me explaining that over and over again in the first few years, but I feel like Big Shoulders does a pretty good job of explaining, when we want to go in and improve an academic intervention, a literacy program, a mathematics program, the change is not going to happen immediately, right? The change is going to happen over time. Our locus of intervention is teaching practices, right? So once you get teachers to change their practice to make it more relevant to student learning and to ensure students get there, then eventually you see those changes show up in the student outcomes over time. And those outcomes are seen in a few different places that we look at very closely, including obviously their standardized assessment scores, but also their trajectory in terms of matriculating to high quality high schools, as Molly described at the outset. We're really looking at where are our kids prepared to go and what is happening to them as they move through that process. So that's really a long-term investment. And so the ability to say that we have 10 years to, my academic team was through the roof with excitement to say we can really make a plan with the school instead of doing whatever we can do 1 year and hoping that it's enough to get us to the next year, right? So this really provides the ability to think strategically about what it is that we're doing at each school level and then across the network to leverage those gains. So, we started doing content-based academic professional development, when I started, basically, so 12 years ago. And prior to that, we hadn't been doing any kind of long-term school-based work. And so I think now we see the fruits of those labors over time, and we're going to continue to move the bar up as we go. So I think that long-term trajectory is just so critical.
And I think that for me anyway, illuminates, the importance of, as John said, protecting the school, and then also in some ways protecting the investment that we want to make in these communities, in these schools, and these students. I remember when Rebecca started, first of all, I said to our board, we're hiring someone that's going to focus just on academics. That was different thinking than, we're doing scholarships. And the second thing, I mean, we got, the first kind of plan, Rebecca said, all right, it's going to take X number $100,000 a year for X number of years. We're going to invest in this, and we're going to see, great success in this. I said, okay, so what do I tell the board we're going to do? The outcome's going to be next year. She said, oh, no, 3 to 5 years. And I said, oh my God, I got to go run the board. And you know what? As Rebecca just described it, it does. It's your changing practice, and over time, that has become part of our culture. Nobody asks about that, but we think about the long term. And I think that's why Big Shoulder Fund Plus, a 10-year agreement, wasn't a crazy thought. That if we want to see continued impact and improvement of what is already a strong mission and program, that takes time. We have to protect the school and the community-based entity, and so I think it's an important part. And even kind of a little bit on that front, I'm sure many people on this call or this Zoom meeting are wondering, and our board wonders, and people who give us support wonder. So when you and your teams are out thinking about this and implementing, how do we track impact this? What is going to be the measurement of this, maybe on an annual basis and over time? When we look back at Big Shoulders Fund Plus after a year, after 3 years, 5 years, how do you guys think about tracking impact and the outcomes?
Well, I mean, the most fundamental measure of it is if not for our program, these kids would not have the option of those schools. And while it sounds theoretically possible that, hey, if they don't like this, if that school's not there, they'll go to the school down the street. Our experience, our longstanding experience is it doesn't work like that. And so again, without these schools being there, they don't have the ability to take advantage of them. And so I'll get into a little bit more detail to your question, but that is why we're doing this. And you could say, well, gee, the number of student years, if you want to say it that way, of how what we've protected. But we've got 5, almost 6,000 kids in the schools that we are protecting. That's a big deal. That's a big commitment that we've made to those families to make sure that those schools are there and the schools are thriving and that the schools are serving them. And maybe the second point to make is that the ultimate measure is the mission of the school. The mission of the school is not enrollment. The mission of the school is not what the deficit was. The mission of the school is not what some static test number is. The mission of the school is how are we serving kids, and is the community seeing us as serving them, and are they choosing to enroll because they see the great the school fulfilling its mission. So there's more finite measures certainly. And I'm going to defer in a second to Rebecca on the academic measures because they don't let me talk about that stuff, rightly so. But certainly there are business measures because these are little institutions, and we have to make the business side of it work in the sense of the funding and all that. And so enrollment is a metric. It's not the mission, but it is a metric that paints a story of the success of the institution. The school's finances are another one. Certainly we will even get into more finite things with, for example, how many social media relationships do we have and all that. That all add up to the business side of running the school. And then, most importantly, really is, are we delivering the academics in the school? So maybe, Rebecca, you want to comment a little bit on that?
Sure. And I think I've mentioned a few of these, but maybe to put just a fine point on it, I mean, when we look at outcomes for the academic side of the house, we really try to take a balanced approach to that and really say, what is it that we want that for that child long term, just like we would for our parents? So what do we want for the children who come out of these Big Shoulders Fund Plus schools in the long term? So that includes their trajectory to quality high schools, their trajectory into college and career advancement. So we track our students all the way through that process, and we want to see that improve over time, right? What interventions are we currently using at the school level? What else could we do at the network level that would make a greater impact? So that trajectory into college or into high school and college is one. Obviously, absolute achievement on standardized assessments is important, but I also think it's really important, and anytime I get to talk about it, everyone gets bored of it, but talking about growth, right? We're trying to move our students from wherever they come to us to wherever they can get to as fast as possible, right? So we're really focused on growth in terms of students' achievement over time. We also look at the 5 essentials, which I think some of you may have heard of from other meetings or conversations we have, but the University of Chicago, over 20 years of school research, basically boiled down to school improvement to 5 essential components that they see as critical to a school performing well over time in terms of student outcomes. So those 5 essentials are measured through surveys that are conducted by teachers, staff, and parents, and those go into kind of a culture and climate scheme that we look at and then talk about how can we make a better impact in those areas. So and the nice thing about it is it's completely third-party data. It's all done by the University of Chicago, so you really get a feeling of a strong sense of having a set of data that is really research-based. And then we look at some other factors in terms of using title resources effectively to serve all students, making sure that we're serving all of the students at whatever learning mode and modality that they need based on their specific needs. So that's kind of the general area. So we have a baseline in all of those things, both operational, academic, and then we look at how that school does over time.
And then maybe that's probably a good segue. Molly Cook asks, given the current environment, what are some of the tangible examples of how we worked with and served the schools during the pandemic? And this is where I will broach a little bit into the academic team, because it is so significant. When basically all the schools shut down on March 13th, and if you asked a school principal or you asked a school teacher, they would remember the moment, they would remember the day, and they would remember on where they were. Some of them were in school, some of them weren't, and that caused lots of problems. But, really the entire world that we work with, and not just the 30 schools, but the entire world we work with, had the challenge of, oh my God, on Monday morning, we're going to have kids not in the building, and we still need to serve those kids, and we still need to fulfill our mission for the kids, maybe a little different way. And between the superhuman effort of the people in the schools, and then what I want to highlight is the superhuman effort of Rebecca and her team, and a couple of people on our team who also have an academic background, of doing whatever it took to help the schools be able to serve those kids remotely, from helping teachers figure out how to all of a sudden deliver content online, to managing a classroom, to getting devices, to how are we going to collect assignments, grading systems, Google Classroom, all that stuff. There was a full court press on to try to make the schools productive in how they deliver the educational product. And you might remember in the general press around that time that a lot of the public school systems really shut down for a period of time, and really only opened up until sometime in May, depending on the system. And really that was, and I'm not throwing stones at them, it was a very difficult time. The great point about what our team did with those schools was none of them missed a day of education. Now, certainly there are ups and downs and how teachers evolve. At the same time, there were some amazing, and we have fingerprints on a number of these, there were some amazing transformations of teachers who had taught the same way for years and years and years, and who certainly were great teachers, but needed to have the kids in front of them to make the way they teach work. And I can think of one particular one at Leo High School, where she decided, listen, I still have these young men to contribute to, and I'm not going to be able to do it my way. I'm going to have to figure out a new way. And she created a new way for her craft, and she'll never teach the same way again. And Kristen Zemke and others really helped along that path. That's probably the most tangible and the most important thing that we did. We did other things like help them get PPP loans and all that, but that was the most important thing. And frankly, that's been a stepping stone to helping the schools get started this year and deal with the ins and outs and ups and downs of COVID.
Yeah, and maybe just to follow on, since John talked about the academic side, I'm going to brag about the operational side a little bit. in terms of what we've been able to do during COVID, and really giving a lot of credit to John in terms of the payroll protection program and getting access set for so many of our schools that were really struggling with the whether they would have to let go of staff during the worst part of the spring. And it made a huge difference for our ability to continue to serve our mission in so many places. But I'd also say, in terms of the coming back, you know, each of our schools was presented with a guidebook on how to reopen their school that had to be applied to an individual school that looks a very particular way and serves a particular group of students, right? And so from social distancing to marking floors to putting up signage to thinking about masking, thinking about how we get PPE into classrooms, you know, working with, you know, Amy was just a hero on getting some of that early PPP into schools and into classrooms as needed. Obviously, the food distribution that many of you know about made a huge difference. But I will say reopening of the buildings was a huge monumental effort by every single faculty member and every single principal in our schools. And I think that I'm proud to say that our Big Shoulders Fund Plus team contributed significantly at an individual level at each school, but then also collectively in helping to bring the ability of the schools to open in some meaningful way based on the specific needs of their community.
And that's a and I'll brag about both because I had very little to do with Rebecca and John and their teams, and as Rebecca said, Amy, heroic efforts supporting work with our teachers and principals and community leaders. Phenomenal. And someday we're going to celebrate that more. But for the moment, I believe that we're running down in time. But Brett and Adam, I think, have some questions that others have sent to them. So I'm going to toss it to Brett and Adam to be careful. I heard they have some hard-hitting journalistic questions. You guys might be on the hot seat now. I was being nice.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Josh and John and Rebecca. I mean, this is really such an incredible chance for us to hear about this great initiative, and I'm excited to get to some of the questions. So just as a reminder, I'm Brett Taylor Haynes, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Networking Speakers Series Committee, along with Adam. So I think let's just jump right into the questions. So we heard a little bit about, in response to Molly's question about some tangible examples of how Big Shoulders Fund is serving the schools. But one of the questions that came in that I think is really interesting and is particularly relevant to the high school experience is how is Big Shoulders Fund working, and the high schools really working with students to think about and evaluate college during the pandemic? You know, what is that looking like from an academic perspective and maybe even an operational perspective? So I'd love to start there.
Yeah, and you know, that's another opportunity for me to brag about people on my team, but we were able actually just before the pandemic to hire on a woman who is fully in charge of kind of our college access and high school transition support programs, and works with Dan Bennett on those programs as well. And some of you may know Dan, who's previously a principal at St. Sylvester and has been on our team for a number of years. And Sheila kind of launched into action right away to work with schools and college counselors on how to support students even remotely, providing virtual college counseling sessions and virtual planning sessions for students at a variety of ages within the schools that we support, both the Plus schools and all of the Big Shoulders Fund schools. And then working specifically with scholars as well. And I know that the scholarship team worked very closely with Sheila and Amy's team as well to think about how can we, you know, advance that more with scholars over the course of this year, given that we know that this virtual support is going to continue for some time. And I think what's really amazing, Brad, just as you kind of mentioned, is I feel like this is a little bit of mother of invention here, and I would hate to waste the opportunity that we've been presented to really learn how to do things remotely. And I feel like some of the things that we are doing around college counseling and support, we're going to continue to do after the pandemic is at a place where we can all be together again, because there's just so much leveraging that we can do. A big challenge, though, I have to say for our students is, you know, going away to college in the middle of a pandemic is a challenging situation. So we're redoubling our efforts with our graduates from last year throughout this year to provide support to them in their first year post-graduation, because we know that some of them had to defer plans for economic reasons, for health and safety reasons. And so we want to make sure that we get back to them and get them back on a pathway if they had to make a change in plans over that time.
Great. Well, Rebecca and John, one of the questions that we got here today was, will there be any changes to scholarship offerings to the students as a result of the covered school program?
That's not the intention. And maybe I should, one thing that would help answer the question is, so the name Big Shoulders Plus is very intentional, and the intention is it is Big Shoulders. It's the big shoulders that everybody on this call or Zoom, I'm not sure what to call these anymore, but what we all think of the Big Shoulders Fund, more importantly, it's what the schools and the families think of the Big Shoulders Fund, plus this other set of, helps and funding and all that. So the intention is that would not change that. And frankly, I know Tom Spirsky is on. We are making awards in the next handful of weeks to all the Big Shoulder schools, not just the 30 ones, but certainly the 30 participate in it. And it's important to us that the 30 schools, among them all, continue to are accessible by families, and one of the ways to make them accessible to families is through the scholarship program.
Great. So I know we're nearing time for closing. So I'd love to ask one more question, and then maybe I'll turn it over to Adam to kind of close us out from this conversation. So, we've heard this is a huge undertaking, and we've heard a ton from all of you that's really exciting. But if you could leave this group today with one important piece of information, advice, a request, how we can be helpful, what would it be? What would you like to leave us with?
Want me to start, John? You can clean up.
Please. Yes.
I would
That's
say,
very open-ended.
Yeah, that is very open-ended.
Hard-hitting question.
Yeah. I would say that this is really, it is a community-based effort, right? We as a city and as a group of people who are interested in the future of our city and our region, and are interested in the future of young people especially, we need the talent, we need the skills, we need the ideas and the passion of everybody for this to work, right? This is a big, lofty dream to continue to provide this access and this ability to provide a high quality education to so many kids over many, many years. And we need, the resources, the thoughts, the skills of everybody on this call to not only help us as a collective Big Shoulders Fund deliver on our promise, but really to help individual students, whether that is through mentoring and tutoring, or whether that's through, college counseling support as we try to, do a better job virtually. We need you to help schools with local school boards and making decisions about how they can be more sustainable locally. So really, it's all of the things that you've always done are going to be the things that make Big Shoulders Fund Plus work. And I just encourage you, if you haven't found a path yet, to reach out to us and find a path of how you can feel most fulfilled and use your skills to contribute to the overall mission, because I think all of it works together to make a better future for the students and for our city.
Yeah, maybe what I would answer, and this is a very special group, and so I'm going to share something that I'm only going to share with this group. So you're special. Please don't, it should not go beyond this. Okay, so this is like, there's NDAs for everybody to sign. But the answer to your question of what you can do to help us is to pity us, because we have to work with Josh Hale every single day. And you should pity us. You should do nice things for us, because that is quite an albatross around us.
I was hoping the truth wasn't going to come out. What happened here?
But this is a special group, Josh. I had to tell him our secret.
I love it.
That's great. Well, I'll jump in here and just wanted to thank everybody again for joining us here today, and especially to Josh, Rebecca, and John for such an informative and inspiring conversation. We greatly appreciate you taking a deeper dive into this exciting and critical initiative for the schools that we serve. We're very lucky to have your leadership to keep these inner city schools thriving as beacons of hope. This initiative will continue to open doors of opportunity and create pathways to careers and a brighter future for thousands of students. My name is Adam Marshall. I serve on the Networking Speakers Series Committee for the CAC. And on behalf of the CAC, I'd just like to thank everyone for joining us for this enlightening conversation. And again, a big thank you to the Networking Speaker Series Committee for hosting the event. Your presence and support of Big Shoulders Fund's mission means so much. It is through all of you that we're able to help even more students each year. So we usually host a networking portion of the event to allow us some time for reflection and discussion about what we've heard, some opportunities to meet new people and to learn about ways to get involved. And since this is an important part of why we like to gather for these events, we will still be allowing some time for networking, and we'll break out into some individual virtual small groups here momentarily. So members of the Networking Speaker Series Committee will help kick off the conversation with a couple of prompt questions, and we hope it will be conversational. So please make sure to introduce yourself to the group and how you've been involved, or if you're new to the mission. We hope that you'll share today about what we've heard today here on social media using hashtag Big Shoulders Fund, and we hope you'll continue to get more involved in the new year. Big Shoulders Fund is always working to create unique opportunities to engage in new ways, and we're always looking for people to help. So before we break out, we'd just like to share a few volunteering opportunities. We're offering e-volunteering, and this is, we've got many ways to support Big Shoulders Fund schools and students through the safety of your home. For more information on these opportunities, please reach out to Tim Liston. There's the auxiliary board. That's a young professionals board. That's a great way to get involved and build your network with other young leaders in the city. And then the CAC. Please consider joining our mid-career professionals board, and feel free to connect with any of us who are in the breakout rooms for more information.